We're going to be looking at the transformation of Europe. This is going to go from about 1500 to about 1750. And so we're going to really look at some early Reformation, going to look at some religious conflict and things like that. So we got several factors to cover today. I'm going to let you read over this yourselves. This is the chapter 16 instructional objectives, the things that we hope to achieve once we are done talking today. So I'm going to give you a little bit to read over that. All right, let's get started. So let's look at culture and ideas first. We're going to look at the early Reformation at the beginning, and then we're going to go from there. In 1500, the Catholic Church, benefiting from European prosperity, was building new churches, including New St. Peter's Basilica, butchered that, in Rome. Pope Leo X raised money for the new basilica by authorizing the sale of indulgences. The German monk Martin Luther challenged the Pope on the issue of indulgences and other practice that he considered corrupt and not Christian. Luther began what was known as the Protestant Reformation. He argued that salvation could only be completed and done by faith alone, that Christian belief could be based only on the Bible and on Christian tradition. The Protestant leader John Calvin formulated a different theological position in what he wrote as the Institutes of the Christian Religion. Calvin argued that salvation was God's gift and that those who were predestined and that Christian congregations should be self-governing and stress simplicity in life and worship, which is very different than what was going on in the Catholic Church at this time. The Protestant Reformation appealed not only to religious sentiments, but also to Germans who disliked the Italian-dominated Catholic Church and to peasants and urban workers who wanted to reject the religion of their masters. The Catholic Church agreed on a number of internal reforms and the reaffirmation of fundamental Catholic beliefs in the Council of Trent. These responses to the Protestant Reformation, along with the activities of the newly established Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, comprise what was known as the Catholic Reformation. So you have the Protestant Reformation that changed the Catholic Church as the only religion to having more. And then you had the Catholic Church realizing it needed to reform itself and did so. The Protestant Reformation led to a number of wars of religion, and the last of them concluded in 1648. So let's look at local religion, traditional culture, and the witch hunts. European concepts of the natural world were derived from both local religion and folk customs. Most people believed that natural events could have supernatural causes. So essentially, if a tornado decided to destroy an entire town, or you had mass famine, that was because God was pissed, and that's what a lot of people thought. Belief in the supernatural is vividly demonstrated in the witch hunts of the late 16th and early 17th century. In the witch hunts, over 100,000 people, 3/4 of them women, were tried, and about half of them were executed on charges of witchcraft. Reason for witch hunts are many, but at the bottom was the tension between traditional beliefs and new religious and political institutions. I know in our country, we focus primarily on the Salem witch trials. That is a very, very, very small portion of the actual overall witch hunts that took place around the globe, particularly in Europe and in Great Britain. Then we come to the scientific revolution. The European intellectuals derived their understanding of the natural world from the writings of the Greeks and the Romans. These writings suggested that everything on earth was reducible to 4 elements. That is, the sun, moon, planets, and stars were so light and pure that they floated in crystalline spheres and rotated around the earth in a perfectly circular orbits. The observations of Copernicus and other scientists, including Galileo, undermined the Earth-centered model of the universe and led to the introduction of the Copernican sun-centered model. The Copernican model was initially criticized and suppressed by Protestant leaders and by the Catholic Church. Despite opposition, printed books spread these and other new scientific ideas among European intellectuals. Isaac Newton's discovery of the law of gravity showed how natural laws govern all physical objects. Newton's discovery led to the development of the Newtonian physics. However, Newton and other scientists did not believe that their discoveries were in conflict with religious belief. They were simply trying to explain what was there, but still said that God and religion played a massive part in that. And so because of these things, it leads us to the early Enlightenment. The advances in scientific thought inspired European governments and groups of individuals to question the reasonableness of accepted practices in fields ranging from agriculture to laws, religions, and social hierarchies. This intellectual movement, which assumed that social behavior and institutions were governed by scientific laws, is called the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment thinkers were also influenced by the Reformation and by accounts of other cultures, including Jesuit accounts in China. The new scientific methods provided the Enlightenment thinkers with a model for changing European society. These thinkers were not a homogeneous group. They drew inspiration from disparate sources and espoused a variety of agendas. Most were optimistic that the application of reason would lead to human progress. The ideas of the Enlightenment aroused opposition from many absolutist rulers and from clergy, but the printing press made possible the survival and dissemination of new ideas. This is Luther. I think we analyzed this before, but this is Luther nailing the 95 Theses to the church door at Wittenberg. This is where he really went from just this troublesome monk to a revolutionary leader. This shows the religious Reformation Europe, where the different religions took place, and then kind of different centers of how it spread, different things spread, and where religion was most influenced. Salem witch trial, or not Salem witch trial, but the witch hunt primary source. All right, so let's talk about social and economic life. We're going to talk about the term bourgeoisie first. Europe's cities experienced spectacular growth from 1500 to 1700. The wealthy urban bourgeoisie thrived on manufacturing, finance, and especially trade, including the profitable trade in grain. Amsterdam's growth built on trade and finance exemplifies the power of 17th century bourgeoisie enterprise. The bourgeoisie forged mutually beneficial relationships with the monarchs and built extensive family and ethnic networks to facilitate trade between different parts of the world. Partnerships between merchants and governments led to the development of joint stock companies and stock exchanges. Governments also played a key role in the improvement of Europe's transportation infrastructure. The Anglo-Dutch Wars of the 17th century provide evidence of the growing importance of trade in international affairs. The bourgeoisie gentry gradually increased their ownership of land. Many entered the ranks of the nobility by marrying into noble families or by purchasing titles of nobility. So now we're going to move down to the peasants and the laborers, kind of that bottom class. So while serfdom declined and disappeared in Western Europe, it gained new prominence in Eastern Europe. African slaves working in the Americas contributed greatly to Europe's economy, because without the slaves there, the Americas and the Caribbean would not be anywhere as profitable as it had. It is possible that the condition of the average person in Western Europe declined between 1500 and 1700. New World crops helped Western European peasants avoid starvation. High consumption of wood for heating, cooking, construction, and shipbuilding and industrial uses led to severe deforestation in Europe in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. Shortages drove the cost of wood up. As the price of wood rose, Europeans began to use coal instead of wood. Some efforts were also made to conserve forests and to plant trees, particularly to provide wood for naval vessels. The urban poor consisted of deserving poor, which were permanent residents there, as in the impoverished class, and large numbers of unworthy poor, migrants, peddlers, beggars, and criminals. And that brings us down to women in the family. Women's status and work were closely tied to that of their husbands and families. Common people in early modern Europe married relatively late until young men could make a living on their own, and young women could work enough to earn their dowries. The young people of the bourgeoisie class also married late, partly because men delayed marriage until after finishing their education. Late marriage enabled young couples to be independent of their parents. It also helped to keep the birth rate low. Bourgeoisie parents put great emphasis on education and promoted the establishment of schools. Most schools, professions, and guilds barred women from participation, so women didn't really have rights unless their male counterpart allowed them to do so, which isn't really having rights. So let's talk about political innovations. We're going to talk about state development first. Between 1516 and 1519, Charles of Burgundy, descendant of the Austrian Habsburg family, inherited the thrones of Castile and Aragon with their colonial empires, the Austrian Habsburg possessions, and the position of Holy Roman Emperor. The Holy Roman Emperor was essentially another title that a monarch could get that controlled the religious aspect, which also meant you controlled many other kingdoms. It was a very powerful position to be in. Charles was able to forge a coalition to defeat the Ottomans at the gates of Vienna in 1529, but he was unable to unify his many territorial possessions. Lutheran German princes rebelled against the French-speaking Catholic Charles, seizing church lands and giving rise to the German wars of religion. When Charles abdicated the throne, Spain went to his son Philip, while the weakened Holy Roman Empire went to his brother Ferdinand. Meanwhile, the rulers of Spain, France, and England pursued their own efforts at political unification. So let's look at the monarchies of England and France. In England, a conflict between Parliament and the king led to a civil war and the establishment of a Puritan republic under Oliver Cromwell. After the Stuart line was restored because of major issues, Parliament enforced its will on the monarchy when it drove King James II from the throne in what was known as the Glorious Revolution of 1688. This also forced his successors, William and Mary, to sign a document, or Bill of Rights, that limited the power on the crown, which William and Mary were actually very on board with this idea. In France, the Bourbon kings were able to circumvent the representative assembly known as the Estates General and develop the absolutist style of government. Louis XIV's finance minister Colbert was able to increase revenue through a more efficient tax collection by promoting economic growth, while Louis entertained and controlled the French nobility by requiring them to attend his court at Versailles. And so essentially what he was doing here is that most of the smaller kingdoms within France had more power than him as the overall. But because he improved the tax system and because he forced them to live in his palace, he actually pinned them against each other like an episode of the Kardashians. And so therefore he was able to consolidate power under him. And he was actually known as the Sun King because everything under the sun was of his control. Now let's talk about war and diplomacy. Constant warfare in early modern Europe led to a military revolution in which cannon, muskets, and commoner foot soldiers became the mainstays of European armies. Armies grew in size, and most European states maintained standing armies, except England, which maintained a standing navy. To manage their large standing armies and to use troops more efficiently or effectively in battle, Europeans devised new command structures, signal techniques, and marching drills. Developments in naval technology during the period included warships with tiers of cannons and four-wheel cannon carriages that made reloading easier. England took the lead in the development of new naval technology, as was demonstrated when the English Royal Navy defeated Spain's Catholic Armada in 1588, signaling the end of Spain's military dominance in Europe and also much of their dominance and trade in the world. With the defeat of Spain, France rose as the strongest power on continental Europe, while its rival, England, held superiority in naval power. During the War of the Spanish Succession, England allied with Austria and Prussia and was able to prevent the French House of Bourbon from taking over the Spanish throne. With the War of the Spanish Succession, the four powers of Europe, France, Britain, Austria, and Russia, were able to maintain a balance that prevented any one power from becoming too strong for about 2 centuries. This shows you guys the European Empire of Charles V, massive empire inherited. Europe in 1740, many changes between the two. This is the actual Palace of Versailles. This is an artist rendition of the Spanish Armada. Now, one last thing we got to talk about, it's known as paying the piper. So we're going to be looking at kind of the revenue side of things. And so the rulers of the European states needed to raise new revenue to pay the heavy costs of their wars. The most successful made profitable alliances with commercial elites. The Spanish, however, undermined their economy by driving out Jews, Protestants, and the descendants of Muslims, so that the bullion they gained from their American empire was sent on payments to creditors and for manufactured goods and food. The northern provinces of the Netherlands wrested their autonomy from Spain and became a dominant commercial power. The United Provinces of the Free Netherlands, and particularly the province of Holland, favored commercial interests, craftspeople, and manufactured enterprises, and Amsterdam became a major center of finance and shipping. After 1650, England used its naval power to break Dutch dominance in overseas trade. The English government also improved its financial position by collecting taxes directly and by creating a central bank. The French government streamlined tax collection. They used protective tariffs to promote domestic industries and improved its transportation network. The French were not, however, able to introduce direct tax collection, tax the land of nobles, or secure low-cost loans. So in conclusion, 1, the religious reformations combined with the scientific revolution led the way for the Enlightenment, an age of reason, and a movement to apply newly discovered natural laws to social behavior. 2, foreign and domestic trade spawned rapid growth in European cities and the rise of wealthy commercial class, with Amsterdam and the Netherlands the most vivid example. Agriculture improvements increased production, but the Little Ice Age and increased mining of forests caused more difficulties for the poor. And lastly, 3, the Holy Roman Empire declined in strength from religious fragmentation, while Spain and France increased centralized power. The English increased naval power and established direct taxation and a central bank, making the nation stronger financially than any other European powers. If you have any